Welcome everyone to Junior Parent Information Night. We're excited to virtually see you. My name is Jessica Smedley. I'm the Director of School Counseling, and I'm proud to have most of our team, of our high school team here with us tonight to talk to you about a variety of topics. Hopefully many of you have been able to join us on our webinars preceding this, even last year for Early College Planning Night. Junior Parent Night is always known as sort of the one where we give you so much information that most people end up a little bit on overload. So I would encourage you to sit back and try to take in what you can. If you're able to watch this as a family or more than one person in the household and take some notes, I think that's really super helpful. You can compare notes. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted within a few days to Mrs. Thompson's website, and we'll also post it to the district website so you can refer back to it as needed. And each one of the counselors tonight will talk a little bit more about resources and how you can access their services. All of our students are assigned to a counselor, and we are determined to give you all the service that you need to get through the post-secondary process as smoothly as possible. So just buckle in and sit back and enjoy being in your own home and not having to be in the auditorium with the mask on. Just for formatting purposes for tonight's webinar, you should see at the bottom of your screen or your phone, your device, a Q&A section. So if you do have a question, you're welcome to type that. Go ahead and type that in the response. All the counselors here tonight are panelists, so they can see that, and we have people throughout the event who will answer questions as they can. If it's a very universal question, we may just respond back through Q&A that it'll be answered live. And so if you see that, then just hang in for the live answer to that. If it's something that they can type a quick response into you, they'll do that in the Q&A. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Laura Housel. And so each of the counselors is going to tell you kind of what their caseload is, and we'll go through and end with Ms. Thompson, who will take us through the presentation. So thanks again for coming, and we look forward to working with you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Laura Housel. I'm located in the upstairs school counseling office, and my caseload for juniors are A through BOL.
I've unmuted myself. Good evening, everybody. I'm Cindy Povell. I'm also in the upstairs school counseling suite, and the letters for my juniors are BOP through DAN. And welcome again tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Toby Flagg. I am also in the upstairs school counseling office, and my caseload is the alphabet of DAO to GAR. Thanks again for coming.
Hi, good evening. I'm Chris Costa. I am a school counselor in the upstairs counseling office, and my caseload is GEA to JOG. Have a good night.
Hi, I'm Beth Moran. I bring up the end of the first half of the alphabet, also upstairs, and my letters are J, K, and I stop at LO.
Can everyone hear me? Karen Sayer, thank you. Welcome. My part of the alphabet is LP through MIZ, and my office is located in downstairs guidance.
Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you can hear me. My name is Ian Projan, and I am located in the downstairs counseling office, and I have juniors letters MO through PRE.
Hi, everyone. My name is Richa Tricka. I'm also located in the downstairs counseling office. My last names for juniors is PATI to SAI. And Miss Jacobson couldn't be here today, so I just wanted to introduce her juniors. Her juniors start at SAL and ends at SW, so the rest of the S's. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Yaroshevsky. I'm also in the downstairs guidance area. My alphabet starts at the STs and goes all the way to the Zs. I think that's everybody in the department, so I'll turn it over now to Ms. Thompson, our wonderful and talented college and career counselor.
Thanks, Why. Thanks, everyone. And the school counselors will be answering questions, so they can feel free to turn their video if they want, so it won't be so confusing. They'll be answering questions throughout, and if any of you parents are sitting at the basketball game, I think that's probably where you might see Miss Jacobson. She's one of our cheer advisors, so she's with the cheer team tonight. So with no further delay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Give me just 2 seconds to get my screen shared and ready to go. Just got a whole bunch of things that I'm going to get us ready to do here. I'll make this to full screen. All right, now we're ready to go. So my name is Ms. Thompson. I'm the college and career counselor. I work in the upstairs counseling office. I work with all of our students who are now entering the second semester of their junior year, and I work with them all the way through their senior year as they do post-college planning or post-high school planning. And this is an idea about what we're going to cover tonight. So first I'll be talking about the college search process, moving on, doing a short section about two-year colleges, then moving through the four-year application process, and then finally talking about financial aid. Throughout, I've interspersed a couple of polls just so we can kind of see where things are going. I'm going to try one now. So you should be seeing a poll coming up in just a second on your screen. And I just want to get a bit of an idea about where everybody is in terms of forming their college list. Have you started yet? You're kind of partway through. You think you're doing really, really well, and you know you're kind of in that revising stage. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so we're most of the way through now, and it looks like, you know, the bulk of you are really somewhere in the middle. So as I'm going through this presentation, you're going to have to kind of catch on with where your family is. You might find a couple things that you're like, yeah, I knew that already, Mrs. Thompson. You know, why are you telling me again? And it is because we're all at different points in the process. Hopefully, we're going to find some valuable information for all of you tonight. This is my first time doing polls, so I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit about where we're at. So it looks like this is going to work, and we'll be able to do it going forward. Throughout, I'm going to tell you, as Ms. Smedley indicated, there's a ton of information in this presentation, and you're probably going to walk away feeling like you got run over by a bus a little bit. It's a lot. Hopefully it's a little bit better with you at home, where you can enjoy yourself and have popcorn or whatever it is that you're having as you watch this presentation. There's going to be a lot of information, though. You're not going to remember everything. So I've given you a bunch of resources throughout with where you can go to find more information, both the rest of this information and then more in-depth information. I've tried to kind of stay overview level on some of the things, but I do already have a lot of resources out there that are more detailed, and I'll point you to those directions in the direction of those things when I do have them. So one of the things that I have out there is our HHS Class of 2023 College Application Guide. This is something that we used to have in print form that we used to hand out, and we've moved it online. So it's basically a Google site dedicated just to the college application process. You'll find more information about the things that I'm doing interspersed throughout that site. There'll be a link. If you go back to the initial email Ms. Smedley sent last Friday, you'll find the link right in there. It's also linked off my HHS College and Career Counseling site as well. In addition, I already have some more detailed videos that I sent out probably about 2 weeks ago when I first told you about this program. I said, hey, here's a couple of videos that you might want to get a jump start with to learn a little bit more. Those are going to be a little bit more lengthy videos that are more in detail about the different sections of the process that I'm going to detail tonight. So those are some really good resources for you to go to further on. Another thing you're going to find throughout the presentation is I got these little boxes up here. They look a little bit like Instagram story buttons. And that's because a bunch of them are. I asked our current seniors, as well as parents of our current seniors and grads from last year, to give me some input. and you're going to see that interspersed throughout the presentation. So I hope that you're able to, kind of glean a little bit about, some things straight from them as well. So first thing up, what's the lay of the land? Many of you have had students come through this process before, so let's get a little bit of an idea about what your experience is in this process. Well, I can see the way this poll is going as we are shaping up. We have a lot of first-time parents here. So those of you who this is a repeat for, there might be parts of this that you kind of have to tune out because you've heard it before. Others, though, I'd say you're going to see some changes there. And so just taking a look, for those of you first-time parents that feel like you're the only ones out there, not at all. A good portion of our respondents, we've got 130 some on people here who are doing this for the first time. So take solace in the fact that you are not alone. And let's rely on some of these folks who've done this more recently. The college process has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years with COVID. One of the things that we're really seeing is that in the past 2 years, SATs and ACTs have been mostly not required. I do think that might shift a little bit going forward, but we're going to have a whole section about testing in tonight's presentation, and I'll address that in more detail then. Generally, we've seen over the last 2 years and continuing through this year, applications are up. That has resulted in more defers and wait lists. More students are applying early in the process, so in October and by November 1st. And that has also resulted in some more defers and wait lists. We've seen more schools offering up things like spring admission and other special programs as they try to manage their entering class and the size of that entering class. Some schools are considering demonstrated interest, but definitely not all. There may have been a little bit of a downshift in the importance of that as we've gone through the COVID process. Now, just to give an idea about where our students are going, here's our results from the class of 2021. You can get an idea about what our most popular schools are for students to attend. Unsurprisingly, we come from a large high school. Our students are used to a large high school experience, and kind of unsurprisingly, most of them are looking for a larger college experience. Definitely not all, but that's definitely where the balance really shifts. You will see an idea of some of our selective college matriculations. So that's where students are attending from last year's class. You'll see UC Berkeley has become a pretty popular place for Hillsborough students in the last few years. We've had some great results early on this year. This is our class of 2022. So our current seniors, some of them were very happy with their early decision results. We've got some of our students who are already all done, buttoned up. They know exactly where they'll be going next year as they got through the early decision process. But we've also had a ton of other acceptances come through already, either through early action or through regular decision and rolling schools that have sent out decisions. Those students are feeling very confident, knowing that they are in fact going to college. Students who are juniors, you'll have this time next year, pretty much in December. It's a little bit, seniors will tell you it's kind of the worst time because you're really waiting to get decisions. And you've put out applications, other kids start to hear, then you start to get worried that I'm not getting in anywhere. Sometimes kids start panic applying to other places. So we really try to encourage students to consider applying to some places, perhaps a little bit earlier in the process, so they have a little bit of confidence going through the rest of the process. But we do have students accepted to more than 200 schools already. So they're doing great this year. All right, so let's talk about the college application process and getting started and making that list. First thing I want to talk to you about is the process requires work. So it's not something where you can come into your counselor's office and say, hey, I need a list of colleges to look at. It doesn't really work that way. We're always going to push back on you and ask you, well, what have you done already? What are you looking for in a school? And it's because one size does not fit all. The more time and effort you put into this process, you're really, you get out of it what you put into it. Those who don't put in time and effort, I find that a lot of times they are the ones that most dissatisfied with their results, but also are really overwhelmed, where, they didn't necessarily have to be so overwhelmed. Perhaps if they engaged a little bit earlier, they would have found more fulfillment in the process and they would have been able to go through it more easily. Don't forget our goal here is we're looking to find the right school or schools that fit your student and your family's needs, where they're going to be happy and successful. My recommendation is, as you're getting started, don't start out by looking for colleges. Actually take a step back, and I really want students to think about where would I be most happy? Where would I be most successful? What are my personal characteristics? Tell me about what I'm looking for in a college. Perhaps reflect back on things like online learning over the last year. You know, a lot of us are kind of glad that's over, but think about how successful were you in a place that there was little kind of required contact, right, with your teacher? How did it go? You know, were you inclined to take initiative and things like that? Those might be real good indications as to the characteristics of college that might be a good fit for you. Because while that college might be in person, let's use, you know, my friend down the road, Rutgers, as an example. It's a very large place. There's not a whole lot of required contact with the professor. It may not be required attendance in class. So if, you know, basically, are you likely to go? All of those kinds of things are really important. So you want to do that kind of work first. I've given you some resources to do that with. This worksheet here is particularly good, the qualities that make a college a right fit for you. That can kind of walk you through the process of trying to prioritize what's important to you and your family. Once you have that down, it'll be that much easier to go through the search process. So when I think about finding the right fit, I kind of liken it to really like a pizza pie. And with three main groups of factors. I've got a social environmental group, a financial group, and an academic group. And in my little picture here, they're all the same size. But that's not necessarily going to be the case for every family. For some, the financial isn't as big of a piece of the puzzle, and social environment and academic take up more. For other students, you know, they're pretty adaptable in terms of social, you know, the environment, but the academic is the most important. I'm going to give you a little bit of information here, but there is a really good video out there. If you go onto the application guide or onto my YouTube channel, there's one called The Search, Finding Your Fit, where I have a more in-depth walkthrough of this process. When I talk about academic fit, these are the kinds of things I'm talking about. And when I say academic profile match right there at the top, I mean that this matches your grades, the course rigor, your test scores, that type of thing. So is the school an academic fit in that way? One of the most important things out there when we're talking about academic fit is major. Some of our students, you know, think they know what they want to major in, or they have a general idea of, I want something kind of STEMmy, or I want something in business, but I don't know exactly what. So you want to look for schools that are strong in those areas. Other school students don't know what they want to major in, and that's fine. The reality is about 20 to 30% of students at most schools enter as undecided students, and that's okay. But what you're looking for there is a school that is going to have a wide array of majors. They're going to give the ability to explore those majors and to declare that major in the sophomore year. But you want to know that they have some guidance for you as you go throughout that exploration process. You're going to find that every school out there has internships. They have research opportunities. They have honors programs. They have study abroad. Everybody's got all of those things. However, as you're looking at schools, you're going to find that some of them might offer things that are specific opportunities as a result of your interest. So say you're interested in marine science, one school out there might have a specific study abroad experience that's in Bermuda for you. Well, that's a real plus. That's a great opportunity for you to go and study within your field. And that may not be available at every school. As we talk a little bit later, we'll talk about different types of schools, reach schools, match schools, and probable schools, which used to be known as safeties. And I really feel like when we talk about those types of schools, those probable schools, this is where these areas you really want to see a lot. They need to have some pluses in their column, right? So perhaps a school you'll make it into an honors program, perhaps a school that has a 5-year combined program that'll get you a graduate level degree. And you want it, when we're looking at all these extra things, these internships, co-ops, et cetera, one thing to really focus on is how attainable are they? How accessible are they for all of the students? Or is it something that only a smaller number of the students is able to take advantage of? One thing I just want to go back to in regards to major is that I do sometimes see students that are telling me, you know, I'm going to major in different things at different schools. And to some degree, yeah, that might make sense. Here I might major in bio, here it's molecular bio, here it's biochemistry. But sometimes I see very wide shifts where I hear students say, if I go to this school, I'm going to major in pharmacy. And if I go here, I'm going to major in mechanical engineering. And if I go over there, then I'm going to major in accounting. you're going to have a really tough, putting aside the whole issues of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it seems like you don't really know, but you're trying to change yourself to fit the place. You're also going to have a very difficult time in the college application process. There's a lot of, the piece of admissions is also looking at the match between what a student says they want to do and what their past experiences have been. So if students think that they're going to change their major based upon what is easier at a particular school, that very much does shine through in the application process, and it does not go in their favor. Next up, we've got social environmental fit. This one, these are some of the easiest ways to narrow schools down. Things like location, distance from home. Do you want mom and dad to be able to stop by on a Tuesday night and drop off some food? Do you want to be able to come home on weekends? Do you want to only come home on Thanksgiving? What about the weather? Are you over the cold yet? I know a lot of us are. Or do you want to see snow because you like to snowboard? And the idea of going every single weekend to the nearest mountain is great for you. So think about those types of things. Think about the size of the school. I alluded to that a little bit before. Are you looking for a small school? You might see schools as small as 1,000 people or even less. You might see, those are considered small size schools. Once we get to that kind of like 5 to 15, it's a really wide margin, 5 to 15,000 students, but that's all considered really like a medium sized school. But I do think there's a big difference between 5,000 and 15,000. And then we get to those larger schools out there as well. Where are you going to be most successful? Think about the demographics of the students on campus. What are you looking for there? This is where I really think that school visit can come in, and students have the ability to kind of walk on campus and, you're looking around and is this a place that I can see, kind of my people? Is this a place where I feel like I'm going to be comfortable? Another way to tell some of these types of things is to utilize other resources kind of outside of the traditional college search resources. So utilizing social media, YouTube, and not just the official school channels, but also kind of, unofficial stuff. Students post all the time on YouTube and on other types of sites. And are you going to hear complaints about every school? Yes, literally every school out there, you are going to hear complaints about them. But there is something to it, I think, when you start to see consistency across multiple platforms and complaints, there might be a little bit more to those things. And it would be good to be aware of them before you go there. Utilize other services. There's things like the Pride Index out there, and also talk to our past Hillsborough students who are attending these schools as well. Many of our students have older friends who go to schools, and they can be a great resource for you throughout the process. Then we've got the financial fit. First, I'll tell you, I will have a whole section of financial aid coming up towards the end of the presentation. So I'm not going to go super in depth now, but some of the things you really want to consider are your ability to pay. How much are you comfortable taking out in loans at a particular school, knowing that the vast majority of those loans are going to have a parent's name on them? How much are you prepared to pay in cash for a school in any given year? I find that we have a lot of conversations about the value of the institution. And that really differs by every, family is different as to what they consider worth it. And it also differs by a program within a school. A student might be willing to pay more for certain schools, given the strength of their program at that school, than they would be willing to pay for a different major. I might be willing to pay more at a certain school for engineering than I would be willing to pay for a psychology major, for instance. It just depends. And I encourage students and families to kind of consider value as part of their process, both in making the list and in their final selection as well. So what are some tools for the search? SCOIR, number one. All of our students here have a SCOIR account. Just this afternoon after the school day, I did push out invites to those who do not have it yet. I also pushed out some parent invites as well. If you didn't get a parent invite, it may be because either you're already active or because perhaps your child is not active yet. So that might be why you didn't get one. I also am a big fan of the College Express rankings. And so I'm not a big fan of rankings in general, but I would say I like these because they're not really rankings, they're more of lists. So this is the College Express site. And ping if you're not seeing this, I like to go under lists and rankings. And the reason I like it is because it's not the traditional, like, give me the top 25 programs in accounting, because I can tell you right now what they are, and they start with Ivy Leagues. A lot of the ones that I really like here is that they're under academics. You'll find that there's a very varied list of schools that you're going to find. So I like to go under majors, perhaps like to look at schools that have, okay, we're going to go with like Asian studies. And it'll give you different kinds of programs that are different schools that have strengths in those programs. They have this for a ton of different majors, but one of the other things I really like is that there's a lot of lists here based on more the personality of the institution, and there's not a lot of other great places to see lists like that. So I like to come here and I start to talk to kids about what kind of environment is a great place for you. And sometimes I'm talking to a kid and I really get the gist that like what you're looking for is a place that's going to have tailgating and school spirit, and like people are going to be walking around with a college sweatshirt and that type of environment. So I like to come here and look at some of these schools. And of course, do we see Duke? Yes, we do. But we also see some other types of schools as well. And you'll see all kinds of lists here. So schools for kids who it takes a little bit longer to make friends, or schools that are big on Greek life, or schools that basically have no Greek life. So they're really good for that purpose. And one other place that our families have really found helpful, this isn't necessarily a great place to start, but I find it's a really good place as you're adding schools in. So what I do at the end of each year is I compile a list of our admits from the prior year and where those students applied, not by name, by the way, not by the student's name, but I list them out by GPA, and I've got where students in this GPA range were accepted, where they were waitlisted, where they were denied, and where they're attending. I think this is really helpful because I find that it's difficult for students and parents sometimes to kind of gauge like what's really realistic for me within this range. It's also difficult, I think, because sometimes the noise that we hear around us is that all students who look like me are going to these types of schools. And I think it's really helpful to get a realistic view of where students in your academic range are actually going, which goes far beyond just where people are talking about going in the beginning of the fall. So, you know, here's a kind of idea you can click on through, you can get a better idea of where students in your GPA range are going. And there's a reason that it's by GPA and not SAT, and that's because GPA gives us a good idea of where that student is academically, and it is a far better indicator for where a student is going to be admitted to school. Now, I mentioned before the college visit, and I know that we have a lot of folks here, or a decent number of folks who have had students go here, go through this process before. This is a place there have been a lot of changes due to COVID. The college visit is not exactly what it was before. A lot of schools you're going to find that it looks different than it would have pre-COVID. You should definitely plan on booking ahead. It's difficult at many schools to now kind of show up and hope to walk around campus that day. You may or may not be welcome to do so, and you probably won't be able to just jump on a tour at the last minute. So plan on booking ahead. The time to be looking for tours for spring break kind of time frame, that mid-April time frame, you want to be planning those trips this month and in the beginning of February to make sure that you're going to be getting on those tours. My expectation is that you will find tour availability in April to be somewhat limited, as schools have had to really kind of ratchet down their tour sizes and things like that and their program sizes. In April, I think that we're going to find that a lot of them are reserving the bulk of those spots for the seniors who are making those last visits before they determine where they're going to be going to college. So those students have to make their decision by May 1st, which is also kind of the end of the college spring semester. So a lot of that April bandwidth may be taken up by seniors. So booking ahead would be a great idea. Looking in the month of March would also be a good idea. Some things to look for, I would say, find out what to expect of that visit before you go so that you're not disappointed. You may find that at some schools, the visit is going to be entirely outside. So it's a good question to find out, will I get to see a dorm room? Am I going to see a dining hall? Am I going to see is the inside of a classroom? If those things are deal breakers for you, I don't want you to be disappointed when you get there and you don't see them. So the place to see some of those things may be online in the virtual tour. A lot of schools have stopped doing in-person information sessions, and there's an expectation that you'll do that type of thing online in advance. So I'd recommend doing that in advance and then doing that in-person visit. Also, when you sign up for a visit, you'll want to find out what the requirements are in terms of COVID. Do they require proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test before you come? Because you want to make sure that you're prepared and you don't get there that day and you're disappointed. All right. next thing, let's get an idea about where you are. Hold on one second. I think I moved to the next one. In terms, actually, we're all good with our profiles. So we're just going to move through refining our list. So let's talk about SCOIR for just a second. You've heard me mention it before. So SCOIR is a college planning and application tool that is used by students, it is used by parents, and it is also used by our counselors. So for those of you who have had a student go through the process in the past, we utilized a program called Naviance. So SCOIR replaced Naviance. Anecdotally, I can tell you there are students like it better. I personally like it better. I found it much easier to navigate. So if students are applying to 2 or 4 year colleges, they must utilize SCOIR. There's not a choice in the process. We haven't reached the point of time yet for this junior class that you've kind of gotten stuck if you're not using it, but we want you to use it this year because you have to use it next year. So what we found is that this year we had a couple of seniors who were hoping to kind of avoid it. And what they found is we couldn't send out their transcripts until they did what they needed to do in SCOIR. So we want to get you involved early, use it for your college search. You're going to use it to determine your admission likelihood. That's a place that is really valuable. And then we use it throughout the entire college application process. However, SCOIR is not where students actually apply to college. That is in a separate place, and I'll talk about that later. So SCOIR runs in parallel to the actual college application. And I'm going to show you in a little bit the SCOIR site, but you can go in on your own. So let's talk about college applications. Last year, our average Hillsborough student, our average number of applications sent out was just shy of 9. That is up quite a bit from pre-COVID. When I look back at the 2019 numbers, we were at 5.6 as our average number of applications sent out. I do hope to see that rein in a little bit as students now, beginning with your class, I find can have a more traditional search in terms of being able to do actual visits, which last year's class didn't really have the opportunity to do so much. So here's an idea about where students might fall in terms of the number of applications that they're falling out. This is where most students are. We do have some students who are one and done, especially if they are a recruited athlete, they're an early decision student who gets in early. Those types of students, they are a one and done. We have other students with a longer list. I do encourage students to be a little bit who incline towards the longer list to be a little bit ruthless and starting to cut those things down. Sometimes we have students who apply to a very large number of schools. We've had last year's max was 32, and I think we have gone over that this year. I will say that those students are very stressed through the entire process, and I'm also very concerned for them in terms of the outcome. One, if they are fortunate to be admitted to most, now they've pushed a very difficult decision on themselves in the last month or so, in that April timeframe of their senior year where they have to make a decision. But more often what happens is that I find that students who are applying to a large number of schools are applying to a significant number of reach schools, and they unfortunately wind up with a significant number of denies and wait lists. And my concern for them is always the emotional end of that, especially when a significant number of those decisions will come within a time frame of about a week. And it is very difficult for any student to receive 12 denied decisions within a time frame of 3 or 4 days. That's really tough for our students. So I want to make sure they're not setting themselves up for that. And I also want them to be able to do the best possible job on their application. So that is finding a more realistic number of schools to apply to, where they can really put their best foot forward and put individual work into each application that they do. Here is an idea about some of our most popular schools and what the HHS stats are for students who are admitted to these schools. This is from the class of 2021. It refers specifically to Hillsborough High School students. You'll see that this column here is regarding, I have WGPA, that's the weighted GPA. That's kind of how I abbreviate that. That does appear on the high school transcript for every student. You'll see a weighted GPA, and you'll also see an unweighted GPA. And we'll go over the transcripts in a little bit more detail further on. This gives you an idea of typical kind of mid-range SAT at these schools. This number is a little bit harder to come by this year because so many schools were test optional last year, nearly everybody. And not all schools publish that data in the same way. So I've kind of done my best to pull together what would be typical for those schools. I'm giving you our accept percentage and also the number of our applications to these schools. So some important things. One, stats are important, but they don't tell the whole picture at all. So case in point, Rutgers right here. You're looking at 85%. You're like, oh, almost everybody gets into Rutgers. Kind of, but what this shows is the percent of students that got into New Brunswick. It does not mean that they got into the schools that they wanted to get into in New Brunswick. So Rutgers is a little bit unique compared to other large schools in that Rutgers allows students to apply to up to 3 schools within the university. So you could pick 2 in New Brunswick and 1 in Newark. You could pick all 3 in New Brunswick. It's up to you. So what's common for our students is that they might pick something like the School of Business, School of Arts and Sciences, and then School of Environmental and Biological Sciences. And the list of the order that I gave them to you right now, that was in the order of the most selective to the least selective. So a student might really be wanting to go and major in something like accounting, but they might not be accepted to the business school. They might only get accepted to environmental and biological sciences, which frankly is not a great major fit for them. They'd have to do a school-to-school transfer after their first year, put some pressure on them, et cetera, but they still show up in the accept percentage. So it can be a little bit misleading. Other large schools don't work that way. So for instance, Penn State, that's another popular school for our students to get into. They allow students to apply to 1 major, and where your backup options are there are in terms of where you start on which Penn State campus. So you might say, I want to major in, we'll keep up with that kind of accounting thing. And so you apply to Smeal College of Business at Penn State University Park. And then your backup opportunity is to say that I would also start at Altoona campus. And we have had students go to the other Penn State campuses and be very happy, but I'll be honest, and the majority of our students are really hoping to start on that main campus. So what happens is that when a student is not admissible to the main campus accounting major, then they're essentially denied to the main campus, count as a deny, and they're admitted to the Altoona campus. Just to give you an idea about how that's winding up this year, I took a look today, and 41% of our students who have gotten decisions back from Penn State so far, which is 65 kids, 41% of them were denied to the main campus of Penn State and were accepted to another Commonwealth campus. And that shows as a deny. So the stats can be a little bit funny across some schools. Some context to these other numbers, when you see higher rates, you might notice some of these are higher rates than for the general pool. And while some of these schools, tend to really love Hillsborough students, our kids joke a lot about Northeastern. And we have a lot of students that go to Northeastern and they joke about how it's a little bit like Hillsborough North sometimes. It's not just because they love us, it's also because we work really, really hard to have students apply to schools that are really within their range. So the bulk of our students who are applying to these schools are really what we know is an admissible range for these schools. So now when we talk about the elements of the list, I mentioned before the different categories. I look at schools like Reach Dream schools. Those are places where our students fall below the average stats for admission, or they are only take a small number of students who look like you, or they're just really, really selective places. Those schools are Reach or perhaps Dream schools for different students. And I kind of look at it like there are different degrees of reach. There are some places that are more attainable and some that are really further down the pike. And that's why I kind of throw that dream thing in there. Then we've got match schools or target schools. Those are going to make up the bulk of a student's list. Those are places where a student falls within the average statistics for admission. The average students look like you, including course rigor. So it's not just about GPA, it's also about the course rigor. Those do most of the students accepted to that school have advanced placement or honors courses, or are they mostly CP, or some mix of all of those things? And how do you compare to those? I generally look at acceptance rate, and I say, for most students, schools with accept rates that are below 20 or 25% really aren't matches. They kind of eking up more towards that reach category for most students. And then we've got probable schools, those former safeties. Those are schools where you fall above the average stats for admission, and where there's lots of accepts that look like you. And as I mentioned before, those are places where we're looking for honors programs. And quite frankly, we are ideally looking for money. We are looking for merit scholarships at those schools. That's where you're most likely to see some merit scholarships. So how do we know where we fall? One, we look at our student GPA. We look at that weighted GPA, and that's what I'll be talking about through the entire presentation, referring to that weighted GPA. Looking at the current test scores, looking at course rigor, the average stats of the school, and also at previous stats from Hillsborough High School as well. And we can tell that by looking in SCOIR. So I'm going to show you just a quick view of the scattergrams to give you a better idea about where you might fall. And I always encourage students and families to be very honest with yourself about where things are likely to fall. I'm also always happy to work with students to give them idea about where they will realistically fall. Sometimes it's not what you want to hear, but I think it's important for you to know that information, earlier on in the process so that you have a good expectation of what the results might be. So I'm going to show you SCOIR. So here is SCOIR, and I'm going to just log in as a student, just like you. And this is what it looks like when I come in. Discover is the search system, so you can look at schools that way, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump right to some different places. I'm using a student account right now. His name is Stu Demo. Stu has a weighted GPA of a 95.26. Just for perspective, when I look at the junior class, the average GPA is right around in the 94 range. So Stu is right around average, maybe a little tad above. His ACT scores are a little bit higher than his SAT scores because his ACT is a 27, and that's a little bit better than an 1190. A 27 is going to give me a score about equivalent to the high 1200s. So that's what you're going to see when I look at scattergrams. So when I look at a school, let's take Ryder, for instance. I'm going to come onto the profile, and there are some changes here. So if you've been in SCOIR recently or not so recently, it's going to look a little bit different than it did before. We're going to go to admissions. This is where we can see average stats, or in general stats for all students who applied to Ryder, not just from Hillsborough. And then there's this view application scattergram. This is the valuable stuff. I currently have it set to be weighted GPA, and it shows for the last 5 years. I always recommend looking at no more than 5 years of data, unless it's a school that's really unpopular with our students, so you're not seeing so much data. And that is because data changes over time. Schools have gotten significantly more competitive, some of them within the last couple of years. And so if you're looking at our full suite of data of like 12 years of data in here, it's not going to give you the real perspective about what's going to be realistic for you. And 3 schools I can think of that have, in particular, that have shifted a lot over the last 5 years or so: Northeastern, Lehigh, and Villanova. Significant changes at those schools in the last 5 years. So when I look at this scattergram here, what you're going to see is going across this way, we see the GPA, and going up here, we see SAT and ACT. The purple star here, that is Stu. All of these green dots around Stu are students in the last 5 years who applied from Hillsborough, and those students have been accepted. And you see Stu here is in really the 75th percentile of our applicants. So he's above average, and also he has a whole mess of green dots around him. So for Stu, I would say Ryder would be a probable school. Now, when we look at another school, let me think of a place that is somewhat more selective than Ryder, but maybe not the most selective place out there. Let me go with, I'll use Lehigh actually as an example. We come on Lehigh. I think it actually may be a little too high, but let's see where Lehigh winds up. We come here and we look at a scattergram. We're going to see Lehigh is kind of a reach for Stu. This is where Stu falls compared to Lehigh students. There's a lot of students here who are, there's a couple who are deferred or waitlisted, but a lot of students who are not accepted. That's what these red triangles are. And Stu is down here below the 25th percentile, so not a great fit for Stu. Now, what if Stu didn't have SAT scores? What I would tell you to do is to take a look vertically up and down this line, and this is still going to give you a fairly good idea about where you fall in comparison to the applicant pool. So even if Stu didn't have these scores, the GPA would be the same. And so we could take a look here. We'd see Stu is still kind of hanging around that 25th percentile. What I would tell Stu, if these were Stu's scores, is this is a place to apply test optional to, because if he had great extracurriculars, it might improve his lot, and he could kind of wind up looking like some of these kids and may get a better result. So that's what I would call probably a regular reach for Stu. If Stu were even further off, where we're going up and down that line and nobody really looked like Stu, then that would kind of move into dream territory for me. If I wanted to give another school that's somewhere in between, let me only use the University of Maryland. I would say that's probably an in-between. That's University of Maryland, College Park. And we have lots of our students that like UMD. So here, we're going to see, again, Stu's scores are a little bit lower. But as we move Stu up here, if we didn't apply with scores, Stu could start looking better, and Stu would be slowly moving into the match range. And if we moved up and perhaps we had a slightly different school, a true match might be somewhere around in this range, but I can't think of a good school right off the top of my head. But that's an idea of how to use SCOIR to get an idea about where schools fall for you. And what you can do as you come up with those is you look at your My Colleges list. As you have schools you like, you want to hit follow. So that will add them here to this following list. Stu has a really long one. And what I can do is, as I kind of determine where I am, I can mark what level they are for me. So I can mark that Fairfield is a match, and I can mark, and I know Fairleigh Dickinson is a probable. And your counselors and I can help you out with that as well, especially as you meet with us. This is some of the way in which we use SCOIR. And then as students apply, we move and we use these columns here. But this is the place you're really using at this point in time, this column right here, the following column. I encourage students to follow schools also, because as you're able to do that, when I get information about schools, I try to routinely send that out to students. If I get information that they're doing a special visit opportunity or a special program, I'll push that out to students who I know are interested in that particular school. And that happens all the way through the beginning of the college application process next year. So it's really good to kind of keep that information up to date. So more information about building a list. Check out the video, Building a Balanced College List. It's even longer. I'm more in depth about the scattergrams and how that process works. So go ahead and take a look at that if you think that it'd be helpful and you want to learn more. Just going to do a quick check in regards to where we are with two-year community colleges and give you a quick little quiz. What percentage of our senior class do you think will attend RVCC? Okay, and you're really kind of all over the map. I've got people saying 10%, 20%, 30%. The answer is really right about 20%. Sometimes we're 18%, sometimes we're 22%, but we really tend to sit right around that number. I believe last year we were right around 74% of our students attending four-year school, 18% two-year school, and the remaining 10% or so we have military, trade, and then last year, especially during COVID, we did have quite a few students who were going to work or taking a gap year. So a couple things about RVCC. One is one of our two-year school options. So for students who are considering two-year schools, I prefer them to think of it not just as RVCC is my only option, but I want them to look at the offerings at the other schools as well, especially those that are commutable, to make sure RVCC is the right choice. Not every community college in New Jersey or in general offers the same majors. So it's really important for students to look at the different schools to make sure that they attend the right one for them. So you can go on and look beyond that. It's important to understand that RVCC has a lot of the same things you're going to see at four-year schools. One nice thing is that you will often find that those courses are of a much smaller size than those at the four-year schools. You're taking a lot of those same introductory courses that you would be taking if you were attending a four-year school. But RV also has athletics, we've got clubs, we've got EOS, disability services, a lot of the other things the four-year schools have. RVCC does not have housing right now. The only New Jersey school right now that has a housing option is Rowan, because there's a program which we usually have 2 to 3 students a year attend. It's called Rowan Choice. Students live on campus at regular Rowan University, and they take their first year of courses through Rowan College of South Jersey, which is the former Gloucester County College, Gloucester Community College. And so we do have a couple of students doing that every year. It's great for those students because one, they kind of ease into the pool academically by taking those courses at the community college level. 2, they are paying community college tuition rates for the first year. They are paying four-year school housing prices, and they do get that, but they do get that four-year school experience because they're living on that four-year campus as well. So it's kind of a nice blend of options. Previously, my recommendation was always, hey, look at Northampton Community College, which is in the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton area of Pennsylvania. But now, Rowan has been a great option for our students. So why do students choose RVCC and other community colleges? It is a significant cost savings. The cost, you're saving about $21,000 in tuition alone. I'll talk a little bit later about the specific costs. It is important to note for students who are in the top 15% of the class, there is the New Jersey STARS program, which allows you to attend RVCC for free. And there is a continuing program at the four-year schools and at four-year colleges and universities in New Jersey to give you a scholarship at that level as well, though it doesn't cover the full thing. In terms of the top 15%, we send out that notification in the fall of the senior year in October. For this year's senior class, the cutoff for that was 100.455 was where the top 15% is. That's not necessarily telling of where next year's percentage is going to be. It's definitely too early to know because the junior year grades are going to count into that as well. We do have students accepted to the Honors College at RVCC, so we do see some students attending through that. And a whole variety of other reasons that go well beyond cost. They don't know what they want to major in, not ready to pin down to a specific school when they don't know what they want to do. We have some students who have very good self-awareness to know that they are perhaps not ready to go away to a four-year school and that they're not real sure that they necessarily want to attend college, and it's a good way to try it out. Family obligations might keep them at home. Some students are unhappy with the four-year college options that are available to them after they've completed high school. Unfortunately, students have, at this point in your junior year, you've kind of found that a lot of your GPA is already established. And it's once your GPA is at a certain point, it can be difficult to raise that GPA substantially. You will have about another third of your GPA that is affected by this year's study. But, you know, we've got a lot of it's really kind of done already. So some students will start at RV because once you do that, you attend there for a full year. Four-year schools are really making that decision based upon your performance at the community college level. So it's a good way to get started. There's all kinds of different academic programs that are available to students in different types of degrees. The admission process to two-year college is very easy. There's no minimum GPA. Students need to complete an online application. We do an on-site application day at our high school. We're doing them in 2 weeks for our current seniors. SATs are not required for students. We send a transcript after graduation. It's really just a matter of completing that application. For students who are looking at the Honors College, that gives you a better idea about what the admission criteria are for students looking at the Honors College. They do have specific information sessions throughout the year. I believe their next one is in March, and it's a virtual info session, and they do welcome juniors. So I'd encourage you to take a look if you think that RV could be, you know, potentially an option for you. If you think you're honors eligible, attend that honors information session. There's also regular information sessions as well that anybody can attend if you're thinking about RV. Now, moving on to the four-year college application process. I know one of the things I'm going to get a ton of questions about is SAT and ACT submission. So if you take the SAT or ACT, do you think you need to submit the scores to all of the colleges that you applied to? Okay, this is an idea about what everybody's taught. And the good news, folks, is that you do not need to submit the scores to all of your colleges if you choose to take the SAT or ACT. You're going to have some flexibility there. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we get into the standardized testing section. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is the application. So when a student is ready to apply to schools, they're going to submit an application. That application needs to be completed by the student, not the parent. And you're going to find that's my message throughout this entire section of the application process here as we're talking. This is really a student-driven process. There is a common application. You're going to hear me refer to that. You'll hear your counselors refer to it. I want to explain what it is. It is one application form that is accepted by many colleges and universities that are out there. So several hundred colleges and universities. It's definitely the most popular thing our students are using to apply to schools. Nearly all of our students who apply to four-year schools are completing the common application unless they're just applying to Rutgers, because Rutgers doesn't accept the Common App. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about these applications. It's something we'll hit on as we go later through this school year, but you need to know there's an application form. students, you can begin a common application in your junior year. You can work on it over the summer. There are some things that you can't do until later in the summer, but you can start working on it. And you'll notice on the left, students mentioning they really wish they could kind of go back and have started their apps in the summer. And that's really because it will relieve some of the stress upon you in your senior year. So I do try to encourage students to get some amount of things done before they come back in their senior year. The other mention there is for you to know your passions before starting apps. So really when you're putting out your application, you want to think, what is the story I want to tell about myself? And this is the true story, not a fictional story that I want to tell about myself. What kind of picture do I want to paint of myself through the application? And there are some elements in the application form itself that are building upon that picture that you're painting, especially things like the extracurricular activities section, the essay section. Those things are all part of who you're putting out there for the colleges to see. So students really want, our recommendation is that you really think, know what your passions are, so those things can also come through loud and clear in those applications, which makes you look like a more authentic candidate and a more compelling candidate for schools to admit. Now, what is the most important factor? It is definitely academics. And notice I didn't say GPA. And that is because, and I've talked about GPA, I used it and I showed you charts of it. I showed you other data about it, but it really comes down to much more than the GPA because it's the entire transcript. It's really the individual course grades, the trends of your grades from year to year, the rigor of your schedule, the strength of the courses that you're taking, what you've taken versus what's available. Schools utilize something called the school profile that we put out every year so that they get an idea about what we offer. And it also gives them context of how you fit within what's offered at our school, how you fit within our class. That profile is available for anyone to see. You go to the Hillsborough High School website, it's under school info. You'll see a link for school profile. You can take a look at this year's. There is a GPA distribution as well there for schools, for colleges to be able to get an idea about how you might compare against your class, because we do not rank. That's not information that they're going to get about you on the, in the college admission process. Also, the senior year schedule is an important part of the application. We want to look for an intentional senior year schedule. So one, we need to meet our graduation requirements. So those things need to be there. But we should be looking at intentional course selection that reflect your academic interests. If we don't know what our academic interests are, then I strongly suggest that you take courses in a variety of areas to give you an opportunity to try things out. Courses at high school, other than your taxes, are still free. When you get to college, you're going to have to pay for them. If you don't know if you're thinking I might potentially want to try physical therapy or maybe business, take anatomy and phys and try to take a business elective. Take those things now to give you an idea as to whether or not they're truly interesting to you. And then part of what the picture that you paint can be, I want to explore many interests. Your senior year schedule should be balanced and maintainable. It is a 10-month marathon to the end of the senior year. It is not over when you submit your applications in the fall. There will be a lot of stress around the middle of the year, cue this week with our seniors as they start to see what those mid-year grades are shaping as, because many colleges will be seeing those mid-year grades in their senior year and they expect them to be good. That's going to be part of their admission process. And you need to be able to make it through your entire senior year in a successful way. So do your research about courses before we do that course selection. Our schedule and staffing is based upon the selections you make then. So don't assume that we're going to be able to just change it over the summer to be, something different. Make sure you're planning ahead. If you need to take some option 2 courses, don't forget about those deadlines coming up in June 1st. Now, this is a snapshot of your transcript. By now, it's accessible in your Genesis account. I really hope everybody has taken a look at their transcript at one point in time, but if you haven't, you should take a look at it. Take a look at it. Make sure it's accurate. Part of the accuracy of that relies on you checking it as well. But take a look and make sure you understand what's there. So this is exactly what schools are going to see about you. They don't see a report card. They don't see marking period grades. They see final grades only, the name of the course, including the level and how many credits you got for it. They see yearly GPAs, weighted and unweighted, and then they see this cumulative information right here. So the transcript you're seeing is going to have here in front of you has a little more info than the one you have in your Genesis, because this is for a first semester senior. So they see the list of courses that you're taking, and that's where it stops. When we get to mid-year grades, it'll also show a mid-year grade here as well. Now, so what that means though is that when you're applying to schools next year, this is more or less what they're getting. So the GPAs that they see here, they're the end of junior year cumulative GPAs, and that's what the balance of the decision will be made on. And for your early decision schools or early action schools, things you apply to in the fall, this might be the last of what they get. They might not get anything else before they make that admission decision. Now, standardized testing, I said we'd come back to it. So when we talk about standardized testing in 2022, we've got test required schools. Those are places where you need to take and submit test scores. Right now, this current year, that consists of public schools in Florida, public schools in Georgia. I kind of feel like the service academies are there. And while Georgetown says you cannot submit, there's like 5 qualifiers on it. So really Georgetown wants your scores. Everywhere else this current year is test optional, test flexible, or test blind. What's going to happen for your class? Not every school has let out a decision yet for the class of 2023. Given those that have, for instance, Harvard and some other big name schools, I am strongly guessing that the vast majority of schools are going to continue test optional policies for at least another year or two, and honestly, quite likely permanently. The exceptions may be if there are any other public university systems where the state board of governors kind of has their hands in those types of decisions. That is what has happened in Florida and Georgia. That could change it for particular state university systems, but that's where we're at right now. I'd say, the time frame where we might expect to get those decisions is probably mostly within February and March for most schools for a firm decision. You can certainly check school websites now to see if they've already made that decision for next year. The best place to get that information, there is a website out there called FairTest, which I normally would use, but I really think that in light of kind of those constant changes, this is a place where I really recommend that you look directly at the college or university website. Know that the policies might be different for different schools within the university. So for instance, some schools within Cornell University are completely test blind. They don't consider SATs at all. It might be different for special majors and programs. Sometimes nursing requires scores. Sometimes BSMD requires scores, etc. Now, what do we recommend? Honestly, I really recommend that all students try to test at least one time in their junior year. And that is really because I feel like it gives you the most options. It puts control entirely in your hands as to what you want to do going forward. You take a test, you know where you stand, and then you can kind of go from there and make your decisions. So based upon that baseline, is my score likely to improve enough for me to be helpful at the schools that I'm looking at? So when we looked at those charts in SCOIR, you saw I talked about, for these schools, I might have applied test optional. I made a decision for those individual schools. Sending scores wasn't great for me, and I kind of moved up and down vertically. If we had gone up and maybe my scores had been 100 points better, they might have been more helpful. And so that's what I'm talking about. If I do prep, is it likely my scores are going to go up enough to be helpful at those particular schools? What is average for test prep? Probably 100 points, maybe a little bit more. Kind of depends on when you tested. A good place to look is your PSATs and see where those were. Also, if you test, it keeps your options open. Those Florida and Georgia schools, I don't think that they're likely to go test optional. So I think that they're going to continue to require them. Perhaps for scholarships, either for university scholarships, but also for private scholarships. As we're putting out private scholarship information, there are organizations that require testing as a part of those scholarships as well. But the good news is you can decide by school whether you want to submit those scores or not. So I could have sent if I were Stu Demo, I could have sent my scores to Rider, which would have been helpful because it probably would have gotten me a nice old big old scholarship at Rider. I could have not sent my scores to University of Maryland and not sent them to Lehigh and sent them to Delaware. It's up to me. I can choose for each school what I want to do. So what you want to look at is where are your scores above average, and then those scores are always going to help. So strong scores are pretty much always going to help in the application process. For students that have GPAs that are below average, that are further below, I do kind of widen my above average SAT rule to say any scores within the top 50% might be helpful because you're giving them other strong academic evidence. So if your GPA is a little bit lower, you're not sure, come and talk to me. We'll talk about at what point I think scores might be helpful for you. And you might be surprised that it might be a lower number than what you think it is. So SAT. You might have heard today that there was some news about the SAT, about a digital SAT. Shut it off, ignore all of it. It doesn't affect you. It starts with this year's current freshmen. So ignore all of it. SAT testing is going to be same old paper for you guys. SAT is out of 1,600, 2 sections, reading and math, just like the PSAT. We've listed the test dates for you. Strongly recommend getting in at least one before the end of this year if you have not tested already. I'm finding an increasing number of our students are really trying to finish off by, I would say, August or so of their year and trying to have that stuff done for senior year. It can be a good idea to try to do that if it's realistic. You got to plan things out, especially those of you that are heavily involved in things like marching band, athletics, things like that. Look at test dates, make a testing schedule. The ACT is a different exam. Colleges look at both exams equally. If you look in that College of 2023 application guide, you look on the standardized testing page, I've got a chart that compares the two. Some students do better on the ACT. They feel like it's an easier test for them. It's a little bit more straightforward. Figure out what's best for you and do what you want. There is score choice out there. You can also, if you test multiple times, you can choose what you're going to send to different schools. Georgetown does require that you submit all of the tests that you've ever taken. Most schools out there super score, which means they'll use your best evidence-based reading and writing and your best math score from different test dates, but there are some that do not. Standout ones there for me are Penn State, UT Austin, and Ohio State, which use the best from a single test date. So there are some differences there, and students can choose what they're going to do in terms of sending scores, and that sending process happens in the beginning of next year. Moving on to AP testing, again, students have the choice of whether they're going to disclose these in the application process. Only some schools look at AP exams in the application process. I will be honest, Rutgers does not care. There's not even a place for you to put it in the application process. It's not part of their process. There is a place for it on the Common App. Some schools will consider them, some schools won't consider them. I generally encourage students to consider reporting scores of 3 or better, though for more selective schools, we're generally talking about scores of 4 or 5 that they're going to self-report on their application. Students who are taking tests, though, may receive credit for strong scores. That might start with a 3, might start with a 4, but if you don't disclose them on the application, it's not a big deal because they're not using that to award your credit anyway. They wait until after you graduate, you send them your official scores, and that's what they determine credit based upon. So it's okay if you don't put them out. And if you didn't do as well, then guess what? You just don't get credit for it. They're not rescinding your acceptance. They don't care. Now, lots of test prep opportunities out there for SAT, ACT. I'm not going to describe them. You can come back in and look at them to get some ideas anytime you want. And there's also courses, things like that. Here's an idea about the price range on the test prep class. Really varies. Private tutoring rates vary as well. Now moving forward into the essay. You're going to see my little thing up there, but it's not your mother and father's college application or your college essay. And I mean that in 2 different ways. One, so much has changed in what schools are looking for in the college application essay. It used to be really that the essay content was specific for the school. You would change out the college name within the essay. It was more of a personal statement type of thing. That's not what the essay is anymore. At this point, it's really a storytelling opportunity that's specific to the student. The values, the attributes of the student that are exhibited in there are things that drive the determination of fit for the school. So I encourage students to really think about personal characteristics of themselves and what they want to put out there, and to get out of some things that are perhaps more common and look for things that are a little bit more unique and really be conveying what is important to them throughout the application process. The good news is that we do the essay for the first time in school. And so students will have the opportunity to work on that. So you don't have to totally do it on your own. My other mothers, fathers, not your essay is don't write it, parents. Don't over edit it. Don't hire someone to write it for your kid. If you're going to hire someone, have them work with your kid on brainstorming, on editing, and on improving the quality of it, but don't hire someone to write the entire thing for them. I can tell you it is so obvious to everyone involved who does this on a daily basis when an application essay has been written by a 17 or 18-year-old and when it has been written in the words of a 45-year-old. It's really obvious to us all. because you have different ideas about what the essay should be. And it really does not end well when a student's not writing their own piece. So parents, let your students do this. Work with them, support them in writing their best piece, but do allow them to do it. Can you start now? Wouldn't probably start in actually writing my essay now. And that's because I mentioned we are going to do it in fourth marking period English. Most of our students choose a common application essay prompt, which means that they can use it. I definitely hear from my seniors, like, I wish I took it more seriously. Yeah, I was kind of burnt out by the end of junior year, but I kind of feel like I blew the opportunity to use that time. So really do try to use that time and write the best piece that you can and learn from it. What you could do now is start brainstorming ideas, learning more about what makes a good essay. My best resource for you any day of the week is the College Essay Guide. You can just go to collegeessay.guide.com, or if you link from here, look for the free resources on the top. He's got a whole college application hub, the most essay resources out there. He's like the guru of essay stuff, but he's got some great exercises, and they're also linked in my YouTube. He's got the values exercise, the excellence exercise. They're able to help you brainstorm a little bit about what you want to write about. That's a great place to start. The bad news, students, is that you are probably going to have to write more than one essay. And that is because certain schools might require very specific essays instead of that main essay, like the University of California system. But then many schools also require additional supplemental essays. These are very intentional. They reflect what the school is looking for and what is important to the school. So often when you read the topics, you'll get an idea about kind of the personality of that place and what they hold important. This is really that emphasis on fit. Some of the more popular ones are why this major, why this school. Those are super popular. Perhaps talking about your most important extracurricular activity. Those are important, but they're not one size fits all essays. So I recommend that students can come up with a framework for it. And you'll see someone kind of mention that. You come up with a framework. The framework is reusable, but the specifics change as we move from school to school. Remember, I talked about not applying to too many schools. This is why. It's really, really hard to write 20 why us essays and have them be authentic. And that's where I see students not getting the results that they're looking for. Can you start on those now? Not really. You can start over the summer coming up with a framework, but the actual supplemental essay topics won't be available till August when the Common Application opens. But more great resources on the College Essay Guide site for that. Letters of recommendation. Not all schools require them or accept them. Schools like Penn State, Rutgers, no letters. They don't take them, you can't send them. When we talk about letters of recommendation, I got two groups. I got the counselor letter of recommendation, it comes from your school counselor, and I've got teacher letters of recommendation. Counselor letter of recommendation, here's the kind of stuff that goes into it. We ask you to do some things here. So first thing we'll ask students to do is that they're going to have to give two teachers a link to a Google form. And those two teachers are going to provide input for the school counselor into their letter of recommendation. So these are two people that are not going to write the students' letters. They're just providing some short input for the counselors. Some good people to ask there might be freshman and sophomore year teachers, perhaps, could be good folks. Maybe some folks that teach in less academic areas of study might be a good person to ask there. Students, you got an email today, like from SCOIR, where I added that link into your drive on your SCOIR account. That's where you can find the link. We'll also send out a little bit more about it in the next week or so, but I wanted you to have it in case, since we were talking about it tonight. We will also be asking you students to do an online brag sheet survey. That'll also be in your SCOIR account. It's a survey, it's not there yet because we don't want you to start on it yet. There'll be one for parents as well. And all of this information, along with the activities section we'll ask you to fill in on SCOIR, which is kind of like a resume, is going to be stuff that the counselor uses to write his or her letter of recommendation. We look for this Google form input. We look for that to happen this year, so during the junior year. The rest of these things, we want them to be ready for us when we come back in the fall. So we typically are not able to start writing letters of recommendation until we get back in the fall, typically in late September. So the best time for you to work on this stuff is over the summer so that you are ready to go and you can be amongst, on the pile of the first ones that are ready when we get back. This is probably the #1 thing that holds up students in the application process. Teacher letters of recommendation. Notice I have the word teacher underlined, and that's because schools are really looking for a specific number of teacher letters, people who have taught you in the classroom or online in the case of virtual. The number required is 0 to 2, really, depending upon the school. later this year, you'll be asking your teachers. We'll do that time. We're not going to start yet. That'll kind of be that April to June timeframe, but now is the time to start thinking about who you might want to ask and be cultivating those relationships. This year, seniors really struggled. A lot of them didn't create great relationships virtually. And teachers also struggled in writing their letters and putting as much meaningful content. The kind of content teachers are looking for is really, they're looking to put in anecdotes about you in the classroom, talking about personal characteristics that will allow you to be successful in college, things like intellectual curiosity, the role you take in a group, what kind of leadership you show in a classroom, genuine interest in a subject matter. Do you go beyond what's required? Make a real effort to be part of and add to the learning environment in the classroom. Those kinds of characteristics, students who do that, those big personalities in the class, or students even who don't have a big personality, but occasionally raise their hand, everybody turns around and looks because they always get something good to say. That's what makes a great teacher letter. So it's not necessarily the place where you had the highest grade, but perhaps it's those teachers where you made a personal connection where they can really write a little bit more about you. You're generally looking for academic subject area teachers, music or art, if that's your major. If you are applying to BSMD, you want to pay special attention because there may be specific requirements. You will need to ask in person first, so that'll be the first piece, and later on we'll have you ask in SCOIR. One thing, please don't over ask. Every year I have students asking 4 or 5 teachers, please don't do that. We can't send them all. Schools don't want them all, and you won't get to read them and decide what you're going to do with them. So you really, please don't be asking that number of teachers. That means that everybody is putting their time in to write something that isn't going to go to schools. And that's a lot to ask of folks to spend an hour or two writing something for you that isn't going to get used. What are some other factors that come into play? Extracurricular activities, we'll be talking about that on your application. We'll work later on the format for that, but start getting it on paper. You can group them, look for trends, things that fit your application narrative, help you figure out what you're going to do about your story. And also by doing that now, you can start to think about whether there are holes that you need to fill in a little bit between now and next November. So by joining additional clubs, looking for internships, a job, volunteering, figuring out another way to pursue a certain interest. Your activities should, when they can, support your major selection, especially at more competitive schools. So now's the time that you can kind of look at those things. Things you're not going to include, things like National Society of High School Scholars. That is not helpful to you. That's not something to include there. You might be getting, it seems now is the time of year for those youth leadership forum type notifications to come out, those mailings with gold seals on them, inviting you to expensive summer programs for like $3,300 for a week. Those kinds of things are generally not very valuable on the college admission process. What's valuable in those might be the experience that you're having, but being invited to one is not considered an activity or an honor on the application. If you're not sure, always ask. Audition or portfolio is required for some schools, for some students. And then there's a lot of stuff that's outside of your control, things like institutional priorities. Some schools are just looking to fill certain needs and you won't, there's nothing you can do to change things about yourself to allow you to meet them. So there is some part of the application process that is outside of your control as well. Now, decision plans. I mentioned these a couple of times. So there's 2 things out there to know, a couple of terms. Early decision, that is a binding decision, a binding application process that is for students who are really sure they want to attend a certain school. They know they can afford to pay, and they've completed the net price calculator on the school website to get an idea about how much that school might cost. You can apply to one school early decision. That deadline is usually November 1st-ish. If you get in, you are attending that school. Yes, there is an out if you can't afford it, but I can tell you that is an ugly process in trying to kind of get out of that a little bit. And also the timing of that is really rough. Student is often really upset if they have been accepted early decision and now can't go. I really try to get folks not to go through that if we can avoid it. Where most of our students are better fit is something is early action. Students apply early. They find out early if they're getting in, but they don't need to go there. There's an idea of students who are good candidates for early action. And I'm seeing a larger shift for students going early action. And there are certain schools where I always recommend early action for all applicants. Schools like Purdue, University of Maryland, Penn State. Those are really schools that your best off regardless to apply early action. That is when you will see your best odds. And I'll review that kind of thing with students as we move through the summer. It's just a quick chart of the things that you should be doing at different times, which things we're going to do now, which things we're going to do in the summer, and which things we're going to do next fall. Financial aid and scholarships. Before I go on, I need to give myself a little, take a drink of water break. So I'm going to give you a quick poll. So what do we think is the approximate tuition fees and room and board for Rutgers? Looks like most of you have a fairly good idea about what to expect. We're talking about 30 grand for Rutgers being the approximate cost. So here's kind of a breakdown. This is kind of a breakdown of tuition and fees separate from room and board. A couple of concepts I want to talk about here. Tuition and fees, those are things that are, tuition is the kind of the academic component. Fees, schools tend to have a list of required fees that you need to pay, might include athletics fees, technology fees, student activities fees, other fees like that. You'll see kind of a variation in types of schools here. Room and board, that's living and eating on campus. That varies widely, probably 11 grand to 20 grand, most expensive in urban areas, most expensive in the Northeast and on the West Coast. And then we've got this concept called the cost of attendance. That's also really the sticker price. That is all of these things combined, as well as other expenses that you should really budget for. Commuting costs, books, pizza, all those types of things as well. Here is a little bit of an idea. This is an idea of just tuition fees, the direct cost to university that you pay to the school. So I've pulled out some of these other total cost of attendance figures, the books and supplies, the transportation, et cetera. So we compare apples to apples at schools. And so you can really see what the variation is. And there is a very, very big variation between schools. Now, when we talk about types of aid, before I go into the rest of this, let me preface this with, I reached out today to my buddy in financial aid at Monmouth. She does an excellent financial aid presentation for us in the fall. That's available right now on YouTube. That's very detailed. She is willing to come in. She used to do a program for us with our college fair. We're going to flip her part of the program. She's going to do it online. We're going to organize something this spring where she'll do kind of a more in-depth overview of financial aid than I can give, but she's going to do something for us on a separate night as well. So I'll preface it with that. So please don't ask me super detailed about your financial aid situation, because I probably don't know. So when we talk about types of aid, two groups: merit-based aid, that's based on what you've done; need-based aid, that's based on what you have or what you don't have. So merit-based aid, that's based on GPA, test scores, leadership, activities, special talents, things like that. A lot of schools you're automatically considered for merit-based aid, but at some schools you need to complete an application for merit-based aid. It is your job, students, to know which, and it's your job to know what deadline applies. Often deadlines are early to be considered for merit scholarship. So remember, I said always apply early to Maryland. 11/1 is the early action deadline. That is also the only way to be considered for merit scholarship at University of Maryland, so may as well get it in. Also Indiana University, which has been very popular for our business students. You have to apply early to be considered for merit money. Ohio State, a lot of these schools that are out-of-state schools that do offer merit money have early deadlines, so make sure you're adhering to them. In general, you can expect that merit scholarships are significantly more generous at private colleges and universities. It is often challenging to get merit money at public universities, especially those that are out of state, and that's because their job is to serve the residents of their state. So if you're an out-of-state student and you're getting scholarship money to an out-of-state school, you often have to be among their top applicants. The out-of-state schools where I have seen the most money to our students: University of Delaware, I see money at Ohio State, I see money at Purdue, I see money at Indiana. I see money at the large SEC schools in the South. So Alabama has terrific merit scholarships for students. Also Arizona State, University of Arizona, great money. Bad money for out-of-state publics. Penn State, not likely to give you a dime. University of Maryland doesn't give much. University of Vermont does not often give a lot of money. The public Florida's, UF, FSU, they don't give a lot of money. The University of California, rarely do students get scholarship money there. You want to take that into account and be realistic when you're looking at the prices of schools. Now, need-based money, that's determined on what you do in the financial aid application, the FAFSA and or the CSS profile. That's going to be loans, which is stuff that you pay back, grants, which is stuff you don't pay back, and work study, which is work you do and you get paid for it. The deadlines for that are going to vary. You have to reapply each year. When we talk about financial aid applications, it's too early to do them. You cannot start doing them until October 1st of your student's senior year. Generally, I encourage students to get those done between, I'd say, October 1st and January 1st if you're applying to four-year schools. You do have to be careful and be planning ahead because oftentimes the deadlines for these financial aid forms go along with how the student is applying. So if they're applying early decision, they typically also want an early financial aid application from you. So you really got to pay attention. And parents, this is a great place for you to step in and take a role in the process. For the FAFSA, you'll be using 2021 tax info. So as you pull your taxes together in the next month or two, make sure you keep all of that stuff in one folder that's easily accessible to you because you may need to go back for it throughout the process for both the CSS profile and the FAFSA. What's the difference? Everybody uses the FAFSA, that is for federal student aid. The CSS profile is only used by some schools, tends to be private, tends to be more selective schools. I kind of liken the CSS profile to like lifting up the mattress and looking for literally every last dime of your money. It is much more detailed in terms of what they ask for. So how does it work? You complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile if you need to do that one. The federal government processes your FAFSA. They tell you how much they think you can pay, which probably doesn't resemble real life, but that's what they think it is. The schools that are FAFSA only schools that don't require that CSS profile, they use that estimated family contribution to determine your demonstrated need. They take the cost of attendance to the school, they subtract your estimated family contribution, that's the demonstrated need. They don't have to give you that much money, but that's what they could give you. First things they look at is going to be merit aid. So that might fill that whole number. Next, it's typically going to be $5,500 in federal student loans. And then whether there's anything else really depends upon the specific school. You won't find out how much money you're getting until after you're admitted to the school. So what should you expect? If you're a middle of the road Hillsborough family or above, you should expect that from the federal government, you're getting $5,500 in loans. If you're a visa holder or undocumented, you're not eligible for that money. $5,500 max, everybody gets it. There's two different kinds of loans. Where your estimated family contribution is will determine whether you get $5,500 in all one category or whether it's spread across two, but it's still $5,500. State aid, middle of the road and above, you're not going to qualify for New Jersey state aid. We do have residents within Hillsborough that do qualify for New Jersey state aid. That is in the form of grants, the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant and the Tuition Assistance Grant. So if you would call yourself perhaps lower income or perhaps lower middle, you might find that you're eligible for that. I encourage those students who are eligible to really look at applying to New Jersey state schools because you can't take that money with you out of state. So the best way to maximize it is to stay in the state. Again, visa holders not eligible, undocumented students not eligible. Where most of our students get most of their money is from institutional aid. So remember I talked about who gives money and who doesn't give money? This is why we care. Private schools tend to give money. Some of the more selective private schools do not give merit aid at all. So all of their aid is based upon need. So yes, we had a couple of early admits to NYU. I can tell you we also have a couple of early admits to NYU who are paying full freight, which means that they are responsible for all of it. They can take as much loans as they want, but they're not getting any money from the school. Different schools classify need differently though. $200,000 income is classified as need at Princeton. Rutgers does not consider that need at all. So it does vary a little bit. So that's where I look at the net price calculators that are on every college's website. You can just Google Lehigh net price calculator. It'll come right up. And the school policy will determine for our visa holders or undocumented students if they're eligible there. And then we've also got outside aid. That's aid that you find on your own, outside scholarships, private loans, things like that. Some helpful resources, net price calculators, as I mentioned. The College Board has an EFC calculator if you want to figure out where things are. There's also a federal student aid estimator. These are calculators that you can do now. If you want, you can just Google them. You can also totally go back and watch the financial aid night video, especially if you have more complicated situation. I'd also encourage you, if you have a more complicated situation, to check out, where you want more info about financial aid, or you're totally tuned out by this point, watch the 10 or 12-minute video I have on YouTube about financial aid and scholarships. I go over it a little bit slower. And if you do it at another time, you might absorb a little bit more of it than you just did. So some scholarship resources. I would be honest, most scholarships are for high school seniors. So parents, don't put pressure on your kids this year. You should be applying for scholarships because there's not a whole lot out there. There's a couple that are super duper selective. There are some that are really lottery style, which are quite honestly data mining your child's information. The bulk of the other, some are things like poetry contests or other contests like that. So those might be good ones to look at, or essay contests. And otherwise, spend your time looking for schools that are going to award merit scholarship money based on what your child has already done in the classroom. You want to fill that list with schools that are going to give that money. That's where you're going to see the largest scholarship amount. It's where you're going to see the return on investment on your time. That's where you will know that if your kid applies to Seton Hall, they're going to get 20 grand. I cannot tell you how many scholarship applications your child will need to fill up out next year to try to find 20 grand from outside scholarship sources. So look at appropriate schools. So those are the things to kind of focus on this year. I also encourage you to have very open and honest conversations as a family this year about what is realistic for your family. There's nothing more heartbreaking than working with a senior who thought they were going to be good and whose parents said, hey, apply wherever you want, you know, we'll make it work. And then at the end of the day, you know, they weren't totally honest, and that it wasn't what they expected. And now the student can't go to the schools that they applied to, and they don't have anything affordable on their list. So have those conversations early. Make sure that the schools on your list are attainable. You might have a couple on there that are reaches financially too, and that's okay. There's admission reaches and financial reaches, that's okay. But make sure we have good probable options on there in terms of finances, and that everybody is on the same page as to what those things are. Wrapping up a little bit, where are pitfalls? You got to be organized in the application process. Those who are not organized find a lot of problems. We've got some resources out there for students that I'll share with you throughout, different kinds of spreadsheets that you can use. I don't care what you use, but get organized or it's going to hurt. Engage in the process at school. We've been already starting group meetings. Some counselors have done a mix of group and individual, depending upon when your HAP is. Go to those, read your emails. If your counselor asks for you to come to a group, can't make it, hey, respond to them and say, like, sorry, I missed it. But stay connected to us throughout the process so that we can help you. We're not mind readers, and there's like 10 of them, one of me, and there's 575 juniors. We're not mind readers. You got to reach out. You can't create your own application process. Things aren't going to work the way you want. You have to follow the procedures that we set forth. You need an organized approach to the application process. Really focus in on that fit. I don't want to see big schools, small schools, schools all over, different majors. Like, you got to have a sensible approach to the process to make this work for you. Keep that list manageable, and also really think about that senior year schedule, and now's the time to do it. I do want to mention private counselors. If you're working with one, great, that's fine. Trust me, we are not offended. We know that is what's best for some families, and that's what works best for you. If you can do that, that's fine. But please be honest with us about that's what you're doing. That allows us to best support you. If you're looking for someone, look for someone with qualifications. They've got commitment to the profession, not just someone who went through the college application process once with a set of 5 schools, because they don't know a whole lot about the other 3,500. Look for someone that meets your needs. There's services at all levels and all price points. So find the right person for you. If you need just an essay person, look for just an essay person. If you want full service, someone to hold your hand through the whole process, you can find that and you can pay for it. You can look for somebody to just help you with kind of the organizational aspects and helping you with deadlines. There's all kinds out there. Know that they should really be taking into account specific info about you and your high school. If they're giving you generic advice like anything with a 30% accept rate or less is a reach, run away. because that's not going to be specific to you. It's not going to be specific to our school. They should be asking to see things like our SCOIR scattergrams to get an idea about how our students fare and where you fall within our class, because they don't have that context to know that a 95 is perhaps halfway through our class, where at another school you might be top 20%. They need to know that kind of stuff. So you're paying for that advice also. Use it. Don't shop around. If you're working with an essay person, go all in with them. Don't come shopping to me, 45 of your friends, and 3 English teachers to get feedback on that essay. Trust in the process and what you're doing. And also don't opt out of our process here. You might be working with them, but you still got to do our stuff here because we have things we have to get out for you. Those recommendations, those transcripts, etc. Parents, I said, you know, this is their process. You got to let them own it. You really need to be their trusted advisor here, kind of their right-hand man, but you can't drive the car. They really need to do it. You're about to trust them with a $30,000 to $80,000 a year education. And if you can't trust them to fill out an application where they fill in their name and address, we got bigger problems. So you really do need to trust them through the process, support them, double check them, remind them. Great piece of advice that parents have told me to keep things from becoming a battleground is to set a time every week where you're going to talk about it once we get into the thick of the college application process. Make Sunday night be, we're going to spend 1 hour going over things, and then I'm not going to nag you about it for the rest of the week. That's a really good way to deal with things. We will help your student, but they got to take ownership of the process, encourage them to come see us, especially as we get into next year. We are really, really and truly here to support them through the process. But they really need to take ownership, which is really going to honestly be a good indicator as to whether or not they're ready to be successful on a college campus. I am going to display kind of the school counseling info. I'm going to continue to take questions. I actually think we're pretty caught up on questions. If anything else pops in, I will answer them. But also, as you log out, you are going to see a survey. Other things that we'll be doing through this year, I mentioned another financial aid night. Hope to be organizing a college panel with representatives from colleges and universities. That'll be virtual as well. And then, of course, my continued email communication throughout the rest of the spring. And then maybe we'll run some other small programs too. If you have any other questions, you can go ahead and throw them in. This will be recorded. I'll send it out in a couple of days. And have a great night for those of you that are done. And someone just asked if I'm going to post the presentation. I will. The actual presentation itself, the slides are already up. If you go into the 2023 application guide, you go to the presentations and videos link, you'll find it's already there. It's also on the College and Career Counseling website. We did record this presentation. That'll take us a little bit of time to take me a little bit of time to process. I'll hopefully get it up by the end of the week. Once I do that, I will also email it out to everybody, along with a lot of the resources that I mentioned. Someone asked about scheduling appointments with me. Yes, I do appointments. I will tell you though, I only do appointments with both the student and either the student alone or the student parent together. And that's that whole piece I said about the students really need to be taking a role in the process. So have a kid email me, we'll set something up. I'll first look at their hat period to try to figure out if we can work out something there. If not, end of the school day. I do work a slightly shifted schedule. So I'm actually in the office every day until about 3:30. So that opens up that 2:30 to 3:30 slot on most days for me to meet as well.